It started with a favor he didn't want to ask. Daniel Ashford stood at the edge of the hardwood floor, hands in his coat pockets, watching the gaggle of first graders tumble into the community center's makeshift dance studio. The music hadn't even started, but their limbs were already moving like they belonged to a rhythm only they could hear. His daughter, Ivy, ran toward the center of the room, laughing, her coat half off, curls bouncing, one shoe undone. She hadn't stopped smiling since they left the car. Daniel should have been in the city by now, 30 stories above ground, preparing for a board meeting that could shift the entire structure of his firm's future. But he was. He was here in a repurposed rec center in the sleepy lakeside town of Green Harbor where his ex-wife's mother had a summer cabin they never used. His carefully scheduled world had unraveled a month ago with one call, the call that told him Rachel was gone. A car crashed just outside Atlanta. Rain. A truck driver who didn't see the light turn red. Ivy, thank God, hadn't been in the car. She had been here with her grandmother. Daniel had barely made it through the funeral before the weight of it all crashed down on him. Ivy had clung to him silently. Since then, she spoke little except when she was talking about dance. That was the one thing she'd asked to keep, dance class, every Thursday. And so Daniel stayed. He was living in a rental cottage a few miles outside of town, working remotely, managing mergers over Wi-Fi, and every Thursday he brought Ivy to the old community center for her class. He stayed outside, usually, answering emails in the car. But tonight the cold had pushed him in, and then the music started. She entered the room like light enters a quiet space unannounced but felt in everything, the dance instructor. He hadn't caught her name, but she moved with a softness that made the room pause around her. Mid-30s, maybe. Long, dark hair twisted up in a braid that slipped against her neck when she leaned down to greet each child. Not just a teacher, someone who saw them. She crouched beside Ivy, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder as they spoke. Ivy nodded, eyes bright in a way Daniel hadn't seen since before everything fell apart. Then the music swelled and the class began. And Daniel sat, barely breathing, as he watched his daughter begin to move again, tiny feet following rhythms she hadn't dared express in weeks. She was still awkward, still hesitant, but she smiled, and he didn't know whether he wanted to cry or laugh or both. The teacher moved among the kids, mirroring, guiding, nudging. She didn't correct much, she encouraged. When Ivy missed a beat, the woman danced right beside her, never making it feel like a mistake, only like a new way to move. Something loosened in Daniel's chest, a grip he hadn't known he'd been holding. The lesson ended too soon. The teacher knelt by the stereo and clicked it off. The room fell back into chatter and chaos. Ivy ran to grab her coat. Daniel stood. She spotted him and bolted, nearly colliding into his legs as she hugged him. "Did you see me, Daddy?" she asked, breathless. "I did," he said softly. "You were beautiful." Ivy beamed, then turned and waved to the teacher. "Bye, Miss Alina." "Miss Alina." The woman looked up from a pile of scarves the kids had been dancing with. Her eyes met his for a flicker of a moment, long enough for something unspoken to pass. A quiet, simple acknowledgement. She offered a small nod, not the polished kind given to a client, but the kind shared between people who had witnessed something real. Then she turned back to tidying. Daniel didn't move. He didn't know her story, didn't know what brought her to this town or to this room, but he knew one thing. For the first time since Rachel died, he'd seen Ivy shine, and the woman at the center of that room had everything to do with it. "Can I come again next week?" Ivy asked, tugging at his sleeve. He looked down at his daughter, her cheeks flushed, eyes wide with hope. "Yeah," he said, "you can come every week." As they walked to the car, Daniel glanced back. Through the frosted glass of the studio door, he saw her dancing again, alone now, moving through the space as if it remembered her. She didn't see him watching. But he did. And for a moment, just a small, fragile moment, Daniel Ashford realized he could breathe again. The next week, he stayed in the studio. Not the whole time, just a few minutes longer than usual. Alina, he made a point to remember her name now, greeted the kids like old friends, remembering details he'd forgotten people noticed. She told one boy happy birthday. She asked Ivy how her new book was going. When the little girl said she'd drawn a ballerina in the margins, Alina clapped her hands and said she had to see it. Daniel sat in the corner near the wall of windows. This time, Alina noticed him early. She offered him a small smile, one she reserved for the adults who didn't quite belong in the room. He wasn't sure if he was comforted or embarrassed. The class began. Ivy danced freer this time, her arms stretched wider. Her turns were bolder even when she stumbled. After class, Daniel lingered as Ivy helped put away props. He watched as she wrapped a pink ribbon around her wrist and skipped over. "She said I could be in the recital," Ivy whispered, eyes gleaming. Daniel blinked. "Recital." Alina walked over, her voice low but warm. "End of term, March 23rd. It's small. We do it here in the gym, family and friends, nothing formal, just a way to celebrate what the kids learned." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know if we'll still be," he stopped. "Still be here." Alina tilted her head slightly, reading the unfinished sentence. "No pressure," she said gently. "She doesn't have to, but she's doing really well. I think it would mean a lot." He looked at Ivy. The girl's entire body vibrated with hope. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Thank you." Alina nodded and turned to help another parent with questions. Daniel watched her, something unsettled stirring in his chest. Later that night, after Ivy had fallen asleep, he opened his laptop to check his emails. He had 24 unread messages, 4 flagged urgent, but he couldn't stop thinking about the look in Ivy's eyes when she danced. He closed the screen and sat in the silence of the small rented living room. For the first time in weeks, he didn't want to go back to the city. He didn't know what that meant yet. But he knew this: Ivy was dancing again. And he wasn't ready to lose that. Winter came in sharp and slow, icing over the lake and the corners of Daniel's routine. The trees stood bare, and the porch steps of the rental cottage stayed slick no matter how often he salted them. Every Thursday, though, cut through the monotony. Dance class had become more than an obligation. It had rhythm now, like a breath that belonged to both him and Ivy. They settled into a quiet pattern: pick up from school, the shared thermos of hot chocolate, the drive to the community center, Ivy's shoes scuffing excitedly as they entered, and Daniel watching, always from the side. What surprised him most wasn't how Ivy continued to bloom, though she did rapidly, like something catching sunlight after too long in shadow. What surprised him was how Alina made space for that bloom without ever forcing it. She didn't direct so much as invite. Children moved around her like planets in orbit, always returning, always drawn back to her center. He didn't speak to her much, not at first. A few words here and there. A shared chuckle when a kid knocked over a water bottle mid-spin. One Thursday after class, Ivy had forgotten her scarf, and Daniel ducked back inside to find it. Alina was alone, sweeping glitter off the floor with a small, battered broom. "Looks like a unicorn exploded in here," he said. She smiled without looking up. "You should see recital week. The stage ends up looking like a Lisa Frank folder." He laughed, genuine and surprised. It had been weeks since anyone made him laugh without effort. He found the scarf near a pile of foam stars and picked it up. "She talks about this place constantly now, about you." "She's got something in her," Alina said, still sweeping. "It's small right now, but it's there, like a pilot light." "She used to be all flame," Daniel said, and then regretted the words. Too much. But Alina didn't push. She glanced up, and there was only warmth in her voice. "Grief dims things, doesn't mean they go out." He didn't answer, just nodded once and left. From that night on, something shifted, slightly, gradually. Thursdays extended themselves, 10 more minutes of watching class, 5 more minutes of conversation. Daniel found himself bringing 2 thermoses instead of 1. One always made its way to Alina, though neither of them said it aloud. The town around them moved at its own pace. Green Harbor had the kind of streets that made you slow down whether you meant to or not. Ivy started 2nd grade at the local elementary. Daniel extended his remote work agreement again. He took meetings at odd hours to match New York time, and nobody on his team questioned it. One snowy afternoon, Ivy begged to stay late after class. Alina had mentioned decorating the gym for an upcoming winter showcase. Ivy's eyes lit up at the mention of glitter and paper snowflakes. Daniel was about to say no, emails were piling up, but Alina knelt beside Ivy and whispered something about a snow queen needing her help. Ivy gasped and nodded solemnly. "So he stayed." He ended up stringing fairy lights across the old bleachers, wrestling with an extension cord that had clearly survived decades of underfunded events. Alina climbed a ladder with zero hesitation, hanging tissue paper stars from the rafters. Ivy held the bottom of the ladder and told them both when things were crooked. "You always do this alone?" Daniel asked, adjusting a row of lights. "Usually," Alina said, "but this year I've got help." She didn't look at him when she said it, but something passed between them anyway. Not a spark, something quieter, something like the hush that comes before a snowfall. The showcase came. Ivy wore a white tulle dress and a crown made of cardboard and glitter. She danced in the second act, arms wide, eyes searching the crowd until she found him. Daniel stood in the back, heart in his throat, not because she performed flawlessly, she didn't. She tripped once, spun too soon another time, but she smiled the entire time, fully, radiantly, like she'd been waiting to take up that space again. Afterward, the crowd clapped and the kids ran to their families. Ivy ran straight to Alina, launching herself into her arms. Alina caught her, laughing, and twirled once before setting her down. Then Ivy turned, ran to Daniel, and pulled both of them into a three-way hug. He froze at first, then let the moment hold him. They walked out into the snow together. Ivy chattered about glitter in her hair and a kid who forgot their cue and how she wanted to wear her crown to bed. "You dance beautifully," Alina said, tucking Ivy's scarf tighter around her. "I want to do this forever," Ivy whispered. Daniel looked at Alina. She smiled softly, not the polite kind, the kind that said she heard what wasn't being said. They stood there for a while, just watching Ivy jump from one snowbank to the next, arms stretched like wings. Snow fell in slow spirals around them. Neither of them spoke. When Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice came quieter than he expected. "You're good with her." "She's easy to love," Alina said, looking at Ivy. Daniel didn't look away from Alina. Not everyone would say that, not after a year like this. Alina met his eyes. "Then they haven't been paying attention." Something unspoken stirred between them. Not a beginning, not yet, just the hint of a door unlocked and waiting. The next Thursday, Alina asked if he wanted to help with warm-ups. He hesitated, awkward in his slacks, but Ivy tugged at his hand and said, "Please, Daddy." So he did. He stood beside her and mirrored Alina's silly wiggles, his knees cracking audibly as he tried to do a plie. The kids howled with laughter. Alina bit her lip to hide her grin. He was terrible at it, he didn't care. That night back at the cottage, Ivy fell asleep humming part of the showcase music. Daniel sat by the fire, laptop closed, the silence pressing gentle against him. His phone buzzed once, an email reminder for a call in the morning. He stared at it, then turned the phone face down. Something was shifting. He didn't know what exactly, but it wasn't just about Ivy anymore. He hadn't seen it coming. But he wasn't running from it either. By late February, the lake had started to thaw around the edges, tiny dark lines threading their way through the sheet of ice like cracks in old porcelain. Daniel noticed them on the drive to the studio, Ivy singing softly in the backseat, her pink backpack covered in little silver pins she'd collected from town. He made a mental note to take her skating again before it melted completely. These were the kinds of thoughts he had now. Skating, which snowbank held the best sledding track, whether the snow would cancel class, not shareholder value, not investor pressure, not even the all-staff meeting he'd missed 2 weeks ago. No one had said a word, maybe they knew not to. Alina had started calling him Mr. Ashford in mock formality every time he offered to fix something in the studio. The ceiling fan, the wobbly chair, the stereo speaker that cut out during rehearsals, he didn't mind it. There was an ease growing between them, not fast, not flirtatious, just real, like the silence between familiar songs. One Thursday afternoon, Ivy was late coming out of school, so Daniel walked to the dance center on his own to let Alina know. It was quiet inside, no music, just the soft shuffle of someone moving behind the curtain of the stage area. "Alina," he called. "Back here." He stepped past the folding chairs and storage bins to find her perched on the edge of the low stage, untangling a mess of colored streamers. She looked up, surprised but not startled. "Ivy's running late," he said. A school thing, I figured I'd let you know. Thanks, want to help untangle chaos. He raised an eyebrow. Is this an audition? She grinned and handed him a knot of ribbon. Depends, are you any good with knots? No, but I'm excellent at avoiding work. They sat side by side on the edge of the stage, fingers brushing occasionally as they worked through the mess. It felt quiet but not empty, like there was more being said in the spaces between their words. Did you always know you wanted to teach? Daniel asked eventually. Alina's hands paused. Not really. I trained for a long time, was in a company in Chicago for a while. Professional. She nodded. Modern ballet, small company, good people, but my mom got sick and I came home to help. Daniel studied her profile as she kept her focus on the ribbons. The line of her jaw, the slight pull at the corner of her mouth. Grief made homes in people differently. She passed, he asked gently. Last spring. I'm sorry. Alina nodded once. Thanks, she loved it here. This center was her second home. She taught here before me. Daniel looked around the room, suddenly seeing it differently. Not just a dance space, a legacy. Do you ever miss performing? He asked. She shrugged, a thoughtful pause before her answer. Sometimes, but teaching is its own kind of stage if you let it be. You still get to create something, only now it's through them. He glanced toward the door, imagining Ivy rushing in the way she always did, arms full of stories, shoes already halfway off. She's different because of you, he said. Alina looked at him then, fully, her voice dropped to something quieter. You're the reason she's still here, Daniel. He blinked. It was the first time she'd used his name. I didn't know what I was doing, he admitted. No one does. There was something about the way she said it, not dismissive, not comforting either, just honest. The door creaked open then, and Ivy burst in with a breathless apology about being late, her cheeks pink from the cold. Daniel stood quickly, smoothing his coat. Alina stood too, already welcoming Ivy into the space with a laugh and an open arm. Later, as class began, Daniel stayed in the back, watching again, but his eyes kept drifting to Alina, the way she moved, not dancing, not fully, but in the way her body adjusted, responded, flowed with the music. Like it was still in her bones, maybe it always would be. At the end of class, Ivy ran to him with glitter in her hair and a crumpled flyer in her hand. It's a parent showcase next week, she cried. You have to dance. He blinked at the paper. What? Just a tiny bit, she insisted. You just do part of the warm-up and maybe one little step. Daniel looked at Alina for rescue, but she only laughed and said, We're trying something new, a parent-child moment. You don't have to if you're uncomfortable. Ivy's hand tightened in his. He sighed dramatically. Fine, but only if you promise not to make me do a solo. Alina tilted her head. No promises. The night before the showcase, Ivy helped him practice in the living room, counting out the rhythm like she was teaching a royal subject. Daniel tripped over the same turn 3 times. She kept correcting him, giggling, endlessly patient. They both collapsed onto the couch, laughing breathlessly. Daniel looked over and found her staring up at the ceiling. Do you think Mommy would have liked this? She asked softly. Daniel's breath caught. He reached over and brushed a curl from her forehead. She would have loved this, he said. They sat in silence for a while after that. Showcase day came. The gym was packed with parents, folding chairs, camera phones, and the faint smell of fruit punch. The kids were radiant. Ivy danced beautifully, but the real moment came halfway through when Alina invited the parents onto the floor. Daniel hesitated, then stepped forward. Ivy took his hand. He moved with the children, awkward, stiff, completely out of his depth. Alina danced beside them, demonstrating each move slowly. Her hands floated, her eyes occasionally meeting his. He wasn't graceful, but Ivy laughed with her whole face, and for that he kept going. The final spin was simple. Turn once, link hands, bow. Daniel turned, his fingers brushing Alina. They bowed together, barely breathing. The audience clapped. Ivy leaned into his side. Alina stepped away, blending back into the room. But for that one moment, Daniel didn't feel like he was surviving his life. He felt like he was in it. Fully. And it scared him. Because for the first time since the accident, he wasn't sure he wanted to go back to the city. March crept in with cold rain and the scent of thawing earth. Snow retreated from the roadsides in patches, revealing tired grass and old leaves. The lake remained mostly frozen, but Daniel could hear the cracks at night from his bedroom window, a slow, shuddering sound that reminded him the world was still moving, even when he felt stuck. The parent showcase had changed something, not publicly, not in any way most people would notice. But inside him, a thread had pulled loose and it kept tugging, quieter now but persistent. He caught himself thinking about Alina more often, not in flashes, not in distraction, but in that quiet way one thinks of a place that feels safe. And Ivy was blooming. She danced everywhere now, on the porch, down the grocery store aisle, in her socks across the hardwood floor. She spoke of Alina like she'd known her forever. Miss Alina says stretching makes your heart taller, or Miss Alina always knows when someone's faking they're happy. She trusted her deeply. The kind of trust that can't be taught, only earned. One evening, Daniel found Ivy sketching by the fire. He leaned over her shoulder and saw a drawing of three people, a little girl with curls, a tall man with a tie, and a woman with long hair in a braid. They were all holding hands. "That's us," Ivy said casually. He studied the drawing, unsure what to say. "You, me, and Miss Alina," she added, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't have it in him. That week, Alina called in a substitute for the Thursday class. She left a short message on the community center line, a family emergency, no details. The room felt different without her. The substitute was kind, competent, energetic, but the kids were unfocused, the rhythms off. Ivy tried to hide her disappointment, but her turns were tighter, smaller. She kept looking to the door. After class, Daniel waited. He wasn't sure for what. Maybe a sign that Alina would walk through the door and smile like she always did, but the studio stayed quiet. The next morning, he called the number on the community center board. A secretary answered and said Alina had gone out of town. No further information. Ivy asked about her every day. The second Thursday passed without her. Daniel offered to cancel, but Ivy insisted on going. "What if she comes back and I'm not there?" she said. On the third Thursday, Alina returned. She looked tired, her braid was undone, hair swept up in a messy knot. Her voice was quieter, her smile slower, but she was there. After class, Daniel stayed behind. Ivy was off helping another girl with her shoelaces. "I didn't want to pry," he said softly, approaching her by the stereo. She nodded once, still not looking at him. "My dad, he had a fall, he's okay more or less, but it shook us up." "I'm sorry." She finally met his eyes. "Thanks." There was silence for a long beat. Then Daniel said, "If there's anything we can do." "I know," she interrupted gently. "Thank you." He watched her as she packed scarves into a bin, her movements slower than usual. "You don't let people help you, do you?" he asked, not unkindly. She paused, then offered a small laugh, not easily. "Same," he admitted. Her eyes flicked to his. "Then you understand." "I do." That was the first time she invited them over. Not for anything formal, just a Sunday afternoon in early spring, the lake still half frozen, her front porch swept clean. Ivy ran wild with the neighbors' kids, bundled in a sweater and rain boots. Daniel sat on a bench with Alina, mugs of tea in hand. She lived in a narrow two-story cottage, the kind with creaky floors and chipped paint on the banister. There was a hammock in the back, wind chimes in the trees, and a dog named Pepper who was half asleep on the porch. They didn't talk about big things, not grief, not work, not the way life had broken and reassembled them both. They talked about books Ivy liked, about how Alina used to sneak into theaters when she was young to watch older dancers rehearse. They laughed about the disastrous parent warm-ups and how Daniel had apparently become the kids' favorite comedic relief. "I think they want me to join the class full-time," he said. "They're building a petition," she teased. He looked at her then more closely than he had before. "You're good at this," he said, "not just the teaching, the holding space." Her smile faltered slightly. It's the only thing I've ever known how to do, keep people moving. That's not nothing. No, she said, it's not. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, Ivy climbed into his lap, her sweater damp with lake water, her hands sticky from a cookie. I like it here, she mumbled sleepily. It smells like books and dancing. Daniel looked at Alina, who was already watching them. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later that week, Daniel had a call with the firm. The managing partner laid it out clearly. They wanted him back by May, permanent, the board was pushing. Projects were stacking up, his leave had been generous, but it was time. Understood, Daniel said, but his throat was tight. That night he sat on the porch of the cottage while Ivy slept, staring at the dark trees. Alina texted around 9, just a simple message, let me know if you want to talk, or not talk, both are fine. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then called. They didn't talk about the job, or the city, or the 1,000 choices pressing down on him. He just listened to her voice, steady, quiet there. And somehow, for the first time since the accident, he didn't feel alone in it. When the next Thursday came, Daniel stood with the parents, as he always did. Ivy was trying a new routine. Alina watched carefully, guiding with less and less intervention. Daniel caught her eye once across the room. She didn't smile, but her expression said, I see you, still here. He nodded, something in his chest lifting, and watched Ivy twirl wide, arms stretched like she trusted the air to hold her. He exhaled slowly, and realized he hadn't checked his email all day. The final snow fell without warning, wet and heavy, clinging to branches like it wasn't quite ready to leave. It melted by noon, but not before Ivy danced across the driveway in her socks, laughing, arms out like always. Daniel watched from the porch, coffee cooling in his hand. The trees were beginning to bud, their tips reddening with early spring. The lake had opened in the middle, a dark mirror catching pieces of sky. Everything was waking up. But he felt stuck between two lives. The offer from the firm still sat in his inbox, bolded, final notice, they needed an answer. We can't hold the position forever, the message read, polite but blunt, the position, as if he were a placeholder, as if he hadn't built half of it from the ground up. He hadn't answered. Every time he tried, Ivy's drawing flashed through his mind, the one with 3 people holding hands. She taped it to the wall beside her bed. That night after she fell asleep, he stood in the hallway staring at the sketch. He didn't know what staying meant yet, what it would look like, but for the first time he wasn't asking what he might lose. He was starting to wonder what he might gain. Recital day arrived like something half-dreamed. Ivy had been talking about it for weeks, rehearsing in every room, adjusting her costume with a focused Daniel reserved for legal briefs. She'd added ribbon to the hem, drew a little heart on the inside tag. For courage, she said. The community center was strung with lights, folded chairs stretched across the gym, parents balanced bouquets in their laps. The scent of sugar cookies and construction paper filled the air. Ivy stood behind the curtain, her hands fluttering like moths. Daniel knelt beside her. You nervous? He whispered. She nodded, wide-eyed. He adjusted her headband. What did Miss Alina say to do when you're scared? Breathe like you're dancing before you move, she recited, almost automatically. He smiled, exactly. She leaned into him, then out again, breath quickening with the music cue. And then she was gone, on stage, twirling across the light, her small body claiming space like it had every right to be there. Daniel sat in the back, stunned all over again. She wasn't the best dancer in the room, not the fastest, not the most precise. But she danced like she had something to say. When the lights dimmed and the last bows were taken, Alina stood at the front to speak. Her voice was clear, calm, no microphone needed. This class has been more than movement. It's been healing, for me, for them, maybe for some of you too. Daniel felt the words in his chest. Alina's eyes moved across the crowd, landed on his just for a second. And stayed. After the recital there was cake and laughter and a flurry of flash photos. Ivy ran around with frosting on her chin, collecting cards and sparkly trinkets from friends. Daniel helped fold chairs, load bins, stack props in the closet like he always did now. He found Alina in the supply room, rolling up posters. "You didn't trip this time," she said without turning. "Personal growth," he replied. She smiled, her movements methodical, her presence stilling something in him. He stepped closer, voice quieter. "I haven't said it right, but thank you." She looked up. "For what?" "For holding space for Ivy, for me too, I think." She nodded once, accepting it without ceremony. And he added, "I'm not going back." Her brows lifted. "You're staying." "I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm not leaving, that much I'm sure of." She didn't rush her response, she let the moment settle. "Good," she said after a beat. "That's good." There was no declaration between them, no grand moment, but she stepped closer, the space narrowing to something private. "You know this isn't easy," she said. "I'm not simple, and this town, it asks for things, time, presence." "I've got both," he said, "or I'm learning." She held his gaze. "Ivy's the reason you're here." "She's the reason I started looking," he said, "but maybe not the only reason I'm staying." That made her blink once, then smile, not the teacher's smile, not the polite one. Something warmer, real. They walked outside together, the air had shifted, you could smell the dirt again, the kind of spring that made you believe in second chances. Ivy ran up the path to meet them, still buzzing from the performance. "Can we go to the lake?" she asked. "The ice is almost gone." Alina laughed. "It'll be muddy." "All the best places are muddy," Ivy declared. Daniel took her hand. She grabbed Alina without hesitation. And so they walked, three people one moment, feet crunching through the edge of winter. There were no promises, no labels, just the choice to stay, to breathe, to keep showing up. Sometimes healing wasn't about fixing what broke. Sometimes it was about dancing anyway.